Welcome to Lawyers Coach. My name is Oliver Hansard, and each episode of this podcast will feature myself or Claire Rayson, both of us coaches and former lawyers, trying to find out what makes lawyers tick. We'll be hearing from various guests and experts, and then at the end of each episode, we will both be reflecting on what they said. In this episode, Claire Rayson talks to Sadie Baron, Chief Marketing Officer of global law firm Reed Smith. Sadie reflects on 2020 and the impact it had on her firm and her team. She talks about the need to do things differently rather than just do different things. And also Claire and Sadie discuss a potential hybrid working world that may evolve in 2021 as we combine office working with working from home. Claire starts by asking Sadie what attracted her to working in the legal sector in the first instance.
To be completely honest and transparent, I got the job in legal without really understanding what I was getting into. I can remember saying to my boss at the time, "Oh, I feel like I've joined, a really amazing top flight firm." And he sort of turned and looked at me and said, "You didn't work that out when you were being interviewed." But what attracts me and what keeps me in legal after 20 plus years of doing it is the people and the challenge every single day. It is a people business. You've got to be really enthralled and curious about how people work, both from the client's perspective, but also how the lawyers work, and then how the whole business comes together and collaborates and makes effectively money, I guess, and runs itself. It's a really unusual model. And I've often said to people that, you wouldn't start out with a blank sheet of paper and model a business as a law firm is, yet, they're very successful with profit margins often way above sort of 25%. And there aren't many businesses and many industries that can consistently talk about that type of return.
And I know that you worked in one of the big four as well, and the big four and the legal sector are often compared, and I think often the big four are kind of held up as the model that perhaps law firms should look to follow a little more. What's your view on that?
So look, there's no doubt. I worked for PwC. It was an amazing organisation. I was very fortunate enough to be in a part of the business that was a high demand buy. I'll be completely honest and say that I don't think they really needed someone like me and my skills, because no one ever sort of didn't take a phone call from PwC Forensics as they are. For me, though, they're so big. They're really difficult to navigate if you are a professional person within them that's perhaps not on the fee earning side. And I found it quite difficult to connect with my colleagues. I had over 350 of them, and it's hard to build those relationships. So I think that's one of the main differences, I would say, between legal. The other big difference, of course, is that the fee earners in one of the big four, they feel like they're failing if they're sat at their desks working in their offices. They need to be out being far more client facing. And I really think that's a lesson that law firms need to catch up on, to be completely honest with you. We need to be much more thinking like the accountants and the consultants think. And I think it's coming, and it's coming even quicker now, thanks to the pandemic, in my view. But yeah, that's my big takeaway from it was they're much more client facing as an organisation than lawyers are.
And you mentioned there kind of two key words, I guess, from this year: client facing and also kind of the impact that 2020 has had. 2020 has obviously impacted individuals and firms alike, good and bad. But I wanted to kind of reflect a bit on the positives and what positives you've seen from this year and that you're going to take forward with you into 2021 and beyond.
Well, obviously, I think like everybody, the impact and use of technology. From my perspective, I do think that's a massive positive. We've kind of hauled the legal industry out of the dark ages and into the light, where, there is now less fear around use of technology. People collaborate far more effectively. I think a positive, although some people might not say it's a positive, has been from a marketing perspective, how people have pivoted to virtual events, podcasts like we're doing today, use of video. That's all become a sort of day-to-day task now for us, whereas before it was a bit of a sort of extraordinary event, doing videos, doing podcasts. So I think that's a huge positive. I think what's going to come out of all of it as well is just this hybrid world we're going to work in once we get back to being able to travel. I don't want to sit here and say that I don't think meeting face-to-face is important, because I actually think it is. I am personally missing social interactions. I worry about my team and how they're doing. There's some members of my team who have started since the pandemic and I've never met them, and that bothers me. And I'm sure I'm not alone, and I'm sure lots of partners and associates and other professional staff feel the same. But I am able to connect with them. I am able to collaborate with them. So I think, there'll be less need to jump on a plane, positive, less jet lag. There'll be probably better events because of it, because people will put more effort into a face-to-face event, and yet we'll be able to still attract the real quality and volume that we are with some of our online events. So I think technology is going to be big. I think a big positive coming out of COVID as well is around kind of firms thinking about how they can deliver different client services now and do things differently. My CIO, a great guy, Steve, he says, it's not just about doing different things, it's about doing things differently as well. And I think that's going to be a positive that comes out of this as well. A lot of the barriers have come down. Also talent. From my perspective, I now feel quite comfortable that I will be able to have a very robust conversation about, the need that I can hire the very best person wherever they want to work in the world now, because that sort of idea that your BD or your marketing person has to be outside your office is long gone now, long gone. I mean, we were on that journey, but COVID, thank goodness, has got rid of that completely. All I now need to do is actually work out how we get the partners to worry less about directory entries, and I will have had a very positive 2020.
You've obviously got a global business, and I know, you mentioned jumping on planes, and certainly one of the positives for me this year is that I know that you've been on the same time zone as me, because it's always impossible otherwise to get hold of you. Do you think that the fact that Reed Smith is so global will mean that it is easier for you as a business to perhaps look overseas to hire, because you've obviously got that network, and there is the possibility that they could go into local offices, albeit perhaps not the one that they're going to be working in most of the time?
So yes, I think we were already there, if I'm honest with you, Claire. It's we were a global business, and we did operate very globally. There's only one practice area we have which is US centric, and that's simply because only the law exists in the US, and that's state tax. So the exception, with them being the exception, literally everything else is a global offering. So I do think it is going to open up for us even more opportunities for people to work more collaboratively and to not worry about where they hire people. That said, there are still things around supervision, training. I worry about it even from our team's perspective. One of the things we used to do every year was get together around the partner retreat, because a huge number of the teams support that event. We've really missed that this year. We've really missed coming together, and I think we've all got a bit of Zoom call fatigue going on. I think we're going to have a bit of a break over the Christmas period of sort of trying to keep all that going, just so that people can have a little bit of downtime and then come back next year. So there's positives and negatives to it. I really miss not traveling. And simply because there is nothing quite like being in, say, New York, and just almost being in reception and just seeing how many people you can capture just because they're coming through reception, just to say hi to, and putting a name to a face. I think that's still super important. But I think I'll be back to where I was perhaps 2 years ago, where I think I spent a ridiculous amount of time out of the country, like 3/4 of it. No, I don't. I don't think there'll be a need for me to do that. I can be much more strategic in 2021 about when I travel, and try and build it around kind of really good reasons to be there.
And in terms of kind of global, just to kind of pause there a second, have you seen different parts of the globe responding differently to COVID and the pandemic? Because I think, one of the interesting things for me this year has been, I mean, in my lifetime, I think it's the only thing I can think of where, globally everyone is sharing the same experience. But have you seen different countries respond in different ways? I mean, you mentioned there that, virtual events, I know in the UK, people have responded very well and really kind of jumped into that. Have you seen that differently in other places?
I don't think the experience has necessarily been different. The reaction to the experience has been different in different locations, for sure. And we've had a range of reactions led by members of our global leadership team. So we've had some office managing partners who have been pushing quite hard to get back in the office and encourage people to come back in the office, albeit in a safe way. And the firm has been very clear to its staff about the expectations around coming back to the office environment, which is a personal choice and will continue to be a personal choice for the vast majority of our offices through till at least April next year. And then I've seen other reactions of extreme caution and real concern about reopening of the offices. And that changes state by state in the US. It changes country by country through Europe. I don't think anybody would be surprised to say that, we haven't necessarily pushed out a one firm policy across Europe, because, what we said would work in the UK, the French and the Germans were like, well, we need to think about that. That's maybe not quite right for us. And then, of course, we've just started to see the fourth wave hit in Hong Kong, who've just literally moved back to remote working again, having actually moved offices in the middle of the pandemic. And everybody's been really super excited to be in a brand new space, and they haven't been able to enjoy it in the way that we would have hoped they could. So I think we're all experiencing these challenges in our day-to-day working relationship. At Reed Smith, we've allowed people personal choice, which I think most firms have as well, which I think is the right thing to do. But the reaction we've had definitely changes based on sometimes the state you're in, or sometimes the sort of bell curve of the pandemic and where that is.
And presumably you're seeing similar things with clients, because again, Reed Smith, the clients that you work with, most of them are global. How are you responding to that as a business, and how are you making sure that you're helping clients where they've got, different reactions as well across their businesses?
So again, we're seeing all extremes. I've had one conversation with a partner who had a client tell him that he will not work with a law firm that doesn't have lawyers in their office. And that's the only instance I've heard of that. And when I sort of questioned it with the partner a little bit, he thought that the client was thinking around quality supervision, and a sort of expectation that, he wanted to work with somebody that had infrastructure, systems, security, and he wasn't yet comfortable that could all be delivered remotely. We've got other clients who we know have said they're not going back into their offices at all, ever again. They're completely remodeling themselves. What else have we been doing? I'd like to think that we've been trying to stand shoulder to shoulder with some of our clients. We've got a number of very significant aviation clients, particularly in the US, and they are having a horrific time as a business. And, we're trying to do everything we can to help them navigate the pandemic, work with them, and just stand, as I say, kind of shoulder to shoulder with them. I think what's been interesting, though, and I was on a CMO roundtable a few weeks ago, and other CMOs were saying the same, is the impact of COVID financially on the industry that was predicted sort of back in the summer hasn't yet been felt quite to the sort of degrees that people were predicting, which was somewhere between a 10 and 30% revenue reduction. And we're all still anxious about what 2021 looks like, but actually the sort of prophets of doom haven't quite come to bear in the way. I'm not saying that, everything's tickety-boo, because it's not. But somehow our clients have stood up, and somehow our clients have continued to operate. And yes, of course, we've been asked for discounts. We've had discounts imposed on us. We've had new payment terms imposed on us. and all of that we do in a negotiation with the client, because it's so important that you are communicating and understanding what's going on in your client's business, and then you're working with them to solve it.
And when you talk about, and it kind of brings us back to where we started in terms of kind of being face to face with clients and talking to clients, do you think that this year has forced your firm or other firms in general to listen to their clients more?
Absolutely. Another positive, I guess you could take, is that I've been banging on about the need to do client feedback and listen to our clients. And, you have one mouth and two ears, and that's the ratio you should use it in, for years, probably as long as I've been in sort of business development and marketing. And I think what's happened this year is because people moved into a sort of digital experience with their clients, and they were seeing people in their home lives, somehow that's made it okay to ask about the family. And that's sort of then deepened the relationship. And then you get into a better kind of conversation about, look, how are things really? And how can we help? And that's the single question we've been telling everybody to ask. How can we help? And then listening to the answers that come back. There's always been, I think in every firm I've worked in, there's always been a little bit of caution and a little bit of concern about, going and ask clients for feedback. Because, what if the client says something they don't like us, or no. Personally, I think that's nirvana, because that's what you want to know. You want to uncover those issues early. So you should be asking and you should be getting feedback. But there's been the kind of more openness, more willingness, certainly across our firm, to allow us to engage with clients on round tables. So we've run, I've lost count now of how many GC round table forums we've run, but the insights that come out of that, all of which we share publicly, whilst we don't attribute it, it's Chatham House, we do share the thoughts and the themes that come out. And it's so vital.
I think one of the things that this year has done is it's forced lots of issues into the spotlight, and diversity is obviously one of the issues that has been brought into the spotlight this year. And working from home has brought different things into focus in terms of values and purpose. What do you think that 2020 has done to force firms to think about values and purpose, and how can firms do that authentically?
I think 2020 has made an awful lot of people, and I put myself in this camp, stop and evaluate, am I working for an organisation that supports my sense of personal values as well? And I'm lucky it does. I think that the other thing that 2020 has done, which is nothing obviously to do with the pandemic, but the tragic events in the US around George Floyd, is it's kind of forced a spotlight on what I'm going to call kind of equity and equality. Racial equity, I think, is very important. Again, I'm lucky. Our firm has been devoted to this for many years. We've still got work to do. For me, though, the positive again coming out of this is we're placing a lot of emphasis around diversity, but actually for me, I think it's all about alignment of diversity of thought as well. We are lucky. We are able to field very diverse teams, but we don't do it just as a tick box exercise. We do it because we genuinely believe that we can bring a diverse thought to our client. And that's what I think is really important. And I actually think that's where the needle's starting to shift and where we're going to see more of that coming in 2021.
In terms of the team environment, there has traditionally in law firms been this idea of fee earner, fee burner, lawyer, non-lawyer. And, it's always been a frustration to me. How can we get firms to embrace those that, aren't lawyers or fee earners to be seen with the same level of respect as those that are?
Oh, isn't that the $64,000 question? For me, I think you've got to measure the right things. So I'd like to see us place much more emphasis as an industry on profitability, and then to really look at how you make your client accounts profitable, and then what goes into those profitable accounts, because obviously often you can see a difference that a non-lawyer, and I hate that phrase, but a non-lawyer can make to the client relationships. I kind of set a challenge out there to the clients as well. The clients need to demand more of it. I think that, we've got some exceptional feedback over the years from clients about members of my team or members of client value making a real difference. We need to hear more of that from the clients. And then I think, wouldn't it be great if we could actually have a sort of reward and recognition scheme? I was chatting to a friend only the other day who has a senior role in another firm similar to mine, and he was asking me some very direct questions around, reward and incentivization of the BD team to bring in work. We don't have that right yet, and I think our firm and every other firm kind of needs to really look at that. Every single person who works for Reed Smith is an ambassador for Reed Smith. Every single one of us has the opportunity to create client relationships, but there's no incentive for the non-fee earning side of the business to do that. So we've got to find a way of trying to make that better. And then I think we'd start to see a more collaborative approach.
And I know that, and it kind of ties into this really, that you're passionate about back to floor experiences. And I know that Reed Smith are going to be doing something quite special in that regard. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that.
We've got a kind of new approach to training going on, which will provide our future lawyers with a great opportunity to come into the business during the build up to their training contracts. It's a different way of doing the new SQE approach. I'm no expert in it, but I've been asked as a chief whether I would take future trainees into my function and give them some experience of working in the firm, learning about how the firm runs, learning how the firm makes money, learning how the firm creates and develops client relationships. And I was absolutely like, hands down, yeah, as did all of my other fellow chiefs. We are also going to do this with clients. What it's going to do is it's going to create, I think, a more rounded experience for someone before they join us on their more what was like a training contract. The other thing is they're going to get paid for it, which is nice as well. So we've kind of completely revolutionized the training contract approach, so people get better experience. And we've been doing that for some time as well, where we have a sort of master's approach to it, where again trainees come in and spend time on projects with us, or spend time with clients on projects as well. And we just know that makes it a far better experience for them. One final thing we're doing right now as well is reverse mentoring in the firm. It's not quite back to the floor, but I'm being reverse mentored at the moment. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm learning so much from a team leader in our staff attorney team over in Pittsburgh. She's really opened my eyes to how the business runs. And I think we just need to do more of that. And we've got real ambitions to do more of it next year as well.
Wouldn't it be amazing if that kind of back to floor were part of the, when you get made up to partner, not just doing it at the ground, but also doing it when you've been in the firm for a while and seeing different parts of the business.
Absolutely. I mean, we do some of that from a diversity perspective. So that's where it started, but I can certainly see it growing. I really can. Wouldn't it be nice to think that if you wanted to make partner, there's always been a bit of an unwritten rule, and it is unwritten, that you've got to at least done one client secondment, otherwise you're not really on the partnership track. Wouldn't it be great if we had that sort of back to the floor experience as well, once you've made partner?
I know we've spoken many times, and I know that you believe that lawyers sell data, which is quite an interesting concept. So I wonder if you can enlighten us a bit about that.
We don't sell the law. What we sell is the experience of the law, and how we capture our experience of the law is all through our matters and our clients' numbers, client entries, whatever you want to call them. And so there is unbelievable volumes of data floating around a law firm, which I don't think is being used as well as it could be. I was really lucky last week to be on a demonstration of a new tool that we've built ourselves, which is basically an experience database builder based on matters. And we've been doing some pilots of it. And it helps lawyers determine their specialisms based on the matter data that they're putting in, and it goes back to them and says, hey, Sadie, we think, based on the matters that you've been working on in the last 6 months, that you are a trade and commodity finance specialist, that you've done some structured finance, that you are talking to clients in the oil and gas sector, that you've done work in Hong Kong, you've done work with partners in New York, you've done work with partners in San Francisco. Would you like us to tag all of that against your experience? Now, I actually think that that is a phenomenal step forward for us, because the hardest challenge we have, and I don't think we're alone in this, is trying to uncover that experience of who can do what and who's done what, because that's what we're selling. What we're selling to the client is demonstration of the fact that we've either done it before, we've done it many times before, we've done it faster than anyone before, we've had better outcomes than anyone before, we've got price consistency for it potentially, that we've done it in their jurisdiction, we've done it in their culture, we've done it in their language. They're the things that clients want us to be able to demonstrate. And they're the things that are really hard to get hold of in a law firm. So that's why I think lawyers are actually in the business of data.
You've given one piece of advice for clients listening, and that was to make sure that they are a bit more demanding when it comes to bringing in different team members. What would your one piece of advice be to other lawyers listening in firms, large or small?
I think that lawyers do need to understand that the world is changing, and it's changing fast. So my advice is embrace it. And it's okay to fail. I think through failure, you're going to build success. So, it's okay to try and do new different things. It's okay to use technology and see if it works, and be brave. My prediction is that within 10 years, 50% of our revenue is going to come from what I call traditional law, the model we have today, and 50% is going to come from other work streams such as consultancy, data analytics, other value add services. And yeah, by 2030, law firms are going to look different. That's my prediction. So I think if you want to be a lawyer and you want to be a lawyer of the future, get your head around that and get your head around it fast, and think about how you want to be on that journey.
Be brave. That's a really nice place to leave it, I think, Sadie. Thank you ever so much for your time. It's been lovely speaking to you.
It is my absolute pleasure, Claire, and it's always lovely to talk to you too.
And that was Claire Rayson talking to Sadie Baron, CMO of global law firm Reed Smith. And Claire joins me now. Claire, I love that comment that Sadie made about accountants being much more client-facing than the lawyers. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's pretty damning, isn't it? I think where it probably comes from is the fact that accountants traditionally have been much more open to sitting in the client's offices, particularly on the audit side. So I think that, perhaps that's where that comment comes from. But I think actually, if you fast forward to today, and you think about the big four, really they're no longer accountants, are they? They're much closer to to the one-stop shop, I guess, that that lawyers perhaps aspire to be. And I think that what the profession has done very well, that perhaps lawyers are only just now starting to get up to speed with, is understanding that problems are never just one-dimensional, and that there are lots of different disciplines that are needed to solve problems. And I think that accountants, professional services firms have perhaps been a lot quicker at adopting that kind of, multidisciplinary solution than perhaps lawyers have been.
Because I heard a real rallying cry in there that of the need for all the lawyers, all the fee earners in the business to really communicate more effectively with clients and do their best to understand what's really going on in a client's business.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it comes back to the thing that we always end up coming back to, Ollie, and it's listening. And I think that, Sadie mentioned it. It's something that you and I have spoken about across all three of our series. And I think that, it comes down to that you do need to truly listen in order to be able to truly deliver to your clients.
And be brave as well. I think she picked up on bravery towards the end. And that was in the context of if you don't try hard enough and you're not brave enough, it becomes okay to fail in certain circumstances. But that bravery to really listen, to say to your client, how can we help? That really came through strongly, I felt. Well, thanks, Claire. That was absolutely fantastic.
No problem.
I do hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of The Lawyer's Coach. Thanks very much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Lawyer's Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're enjoying this series, please rate us on your podcast provider so that others can find us. If you're a lawyer and would like to take part in Lawyer's Coach, please visit our website lawyercoach.co.uk for further details. And you can also join the conversation on our LinkedIn group Lawyer's Coach. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then just get in touch.